my channel. I am over the moon happy that Alexis from Oro Rosa allowed me to do a tutorial of her Erica bowler bag, and this is what we are going to be making today. It is absolutely amazing. I go over in the video the interfacings and everything as we go. This is a little bit of a longer video because it is some different techniques that I have not explored before in my tutorials, so I really hope you like it. I apologize for my mic cord hanging down here. I know there were some audio problems with my last one as my camera is further away now, so I hope this is better. I do have a long cord coming, so you won't see this forever. Anyways, enjoy. I hope you like this tutorial. Make sure you like and subscribe if you do. Thanks, everyone. All right, so for hardware for the Erica bowler bag, what you're going to need is rivets. If you're doing the crossbody strap, 2 1-inch D-rings. Optional purse feet. I have to grab some purse feet because I think I'm going to do that. 2 zipper pulls, 2 lobster clasps or swivel clasps, and a 1-inch slider. I've already gone ahead and made my crossbody strap. The strap, I do have a strap tutorial on how to do this in my Bag Makers 101 playlist, so definitely go there to see how I do my strap. I like to get it out of the way. The other pieces that you cut out, there actually aren't too many pieces in this pattern. So you're going to need the lining and the exterior pieces for your zipper panel. Now, in my video, when you're looking at, we have it interfaced with, I'm using Fashion Fuse medium woven interfacing. You're going to see some of it is black and some of it's white. It's only because I ran out of white and I had to substitute in for my black stuff. So don't let that throw you off or confuse you. It's the same stuff, it's just a different color. There is an option that for the zipper panel, the exterior pieces, you can interface them with Decovil Lite as well. You just have to make sure you cut it out of the seam allowance. I think it's going to be sturdy enough that I'm not going to worry about that. The Oro Rosa bag, I actually used foam. In the Oro Rosa Magdalena bag, I actually used foam instead of Decovil Lite, and it was fine, but I didn't use anything on these pieces as well, and it turned out okay. So we're going to give it a go this time. So you got those 4 pieces that go together. The next set that you need is the lining and exterior pieces for your front pocket. We're going with this incredibly cute, I just love the new Lineworks line from Tula Pink. And then of course I have, for my lining, it's some older Tula Pink. So this is a Tula Pink themed bag. So all 4 pieces, because I'm not using vinyl for the exterior pocket, I did interface it with Fashion Fuse or a medium woven interfacing on all 4 pieces, as well as the Decovil Lite outside of the seam allowances. You're also going to need your 2 exterior panels, the front and the back, and they are interfaced with Decovil Lite. Where there's Decovil Lite, you could definitely do it with foam. Foam, if you can cut it, it's hard because if it's fusible, it's not bad because this isn't a turning bag. This is a bag that is sealed with binding, so you don't really have to worry about turning it out and getting the wrinkles. I would definitely recommend keeping it out of the seam allowances if you can, not necessarily because your machine won't handle it, but because you will be doing binding later and you want it to be as thin as it possibly can to get that binding through. So I'm doing it with Decovil Lite, so that's those 4 pieces, and the lining as well, which is interfaced with the medium woven. 2 of these are going to handle the strap, cover the straps underneath the pockets, so just 2 pieces of vinyl for that. Your 2 gusset pieces, your liner and your exterior. My liner, again, this is a woven interfacing, it's just black, so there's my lining piece, and then the exterior piece, again with Decovil Lite, outside of the seam allowances. You have 2 pieces that have the woven interfacing on the back. This is for the slip pocket and the zipper pocket on the inside. Then finally, and this is what we're going to work on right now, 2 strap connectors for the crossbody strap, and then your 2 handles. Usually in my videos I don't go through how I do the handles. You can do these handles, I apologize for Coco there. You can definitely go through and do the handles just like I have in my playlist, but I'm actually going to go through how she does them in the pattern because it's a nice little decorative add to it. It's not that much different, but it is a little bit different. I'm going to go and see what's wrong with my Coco there, and then I will be back and we will get started on these handles. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do, and I've already gone ahead and done that, I forgot to mention that on the connectors there's a little piece of Decovil Lite in the middle there. You want to go through and, I don't know if you can see, mark a center line on both straps and on your connector pieces. Now what she is recommending is on each end of the handles that you mark in 1.5 inches, which I'm going to go ahead and do now. When I mark on the wrong side of vinyl, I just use a regular ballpoint pen. See, this one's my embroidery. So mark in 1.5 inches. And then in these corners, mark in a 1-inch line from each side, like this. And then connect the lines this way, from that 1-inch line all the way to that 1.5-inch line that we just did. And then we're going to go ahead and cut away those triangles. So what this is going to do, because this is also going to be part of the binding, is it just takes away some of the bulk from those corners. So go ahead and do that with all 4 of your corners, and then we'll come back and I'll show you what we've done that on all 4 corners of my handles. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take some double-sided tape. This is just a generic Crafters double-sided tape that I got off of Amazon.ca. I like it. I have an industrial machine, so I don't worry about gumming up the needle too much, so it doesn't bother me. My Juki 2010Q sometimes liked it and sometimes didn't, so I really just think it's touch and go whether you use it. You don't have to use it. I just find it's easier. So I'm going to put it down that center line that we drew. And this is just how we've made all of, the other straps, like for my other bags. It's a very similar process. Okay, and then while I have the tape out, I'm also going to do tape down the center line of my connectors as well. And this is just a 3/8 tape. I get a big bundle of tape that comes in all sorts of different widths. I have like 1/8 of an inch and 1/4 of an inch, 3/8, half, and 1. I think 3/8 is the one I use the most though. So, okay, you're going to remove the paper from your double-sided tape, or you don't. I said you don't need to use double-sided tape. You could just use clips. I'm going to use both. Okay, so what you're going to do is take each side and you're going to fold it in to that center line. What this is going to do is give you a 1-inch strap. Okay, and then go ahead and do that with the other side. Fold it into the center so they meet up. And then fold them in upon themselves like this. Matching up that folded edge on each side. Just like so. And then you go ahead and you do that with your other strap as well. I have both of them clipped, and what I'm going to do is I'm not going to take the camera to the sewing machine because I'm just going to be sewing straight lines. Usually when making straps, you would be going and sewing 1/8 of an inch seam allowance away from each side. We're not going to do that with these. We're going to actually do 3/8 of an inch from each side. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'll be back to show you what we got. Okay, so here is our straps. We went ahead and you can see they're not right on the ends. They're about 3/8 of an inch in. Can you see that? From each side, and about 1/8 of an inch apart from each other in the center. We will end up doing the outside here. You'll see that as we go along later. So our next step, I've already done one, is to prepare our connectors. So again, take off the double-sided tape paper and fold the edges into the center, just like we did with the straps. The only difference is we are not going to fold it again. We're just going to keep it that way so they're 1-inch straps. So now I'm going to take these to the machine, and on each side I'm going to do a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, so there they are. So they look just like a regular strap. So now what I like to do is I like to take just a little bit more double-sided tape and put a little bit at the bottom, like so, and take your 2 1-inch D-rings. Take off the tape, put your D-ring this way so the raw edges are along the flat side of the D-ring, and bring those raw edges together. And then I just put a little clip on, make sure they're nice and even. Put a little clip on, and then we can put these aside for later, for when we're assembling the zipper panel. Just like that. So continuing on with the handles, I like to use, we're going to be marking the handle up, I like to use my Clover Choco pen, just because it's easy to wash or wipe away from anything. So just reading the instructions here. So from each end of the handles, we want to make a mark at 5.5 inches and 6.5 inches. So that's where I take my Choco. There's 5.5. There's 6.5. Do the same on the other side. Five and a half. 6.5. And then do the same on the other one. Make sure you're deciding which is your right and which is your wrong side. Both of mine look pretty much the same, but the right side always looks a little bit better. 5.5. 6.5. I just love this ruler. It's a 6.5 by a 6.5 square. I have no idea where I bought it. It says it's a So Easy, designed in Australia, so square, but you see, I have no idea where I bought it, but it's one of my favorite rulers. Five and a half. Okay, and then on the wrong side of each handle, you're going to take about a 5-inch strip of double-sided tape and put it from the bottom to the top on each side. 5 inches. Oops. And this is going to help hold the handle in place underneath that pocket until we get it all sewed in. So 5 inches. Oops. Just like that. So what we're going to do now is we are going to start from the side that has our open side here. we are going to start around in the middle. We are not going to backstitch. We're going to have a nice seamless line here, and after we've done the stop stitching, we'll come back and I'll show you how we're going to tie off those threads. So you're going to start in the middle, no backstitching, just sew all the way down to, I believe it's that, to the 6.5 line. So the first line you come to, pivot, go across, go all the way up the folded side to that 6.5 line here, pivot, go across, come back down, and make sure your needle, you might have to hand crank, lands in the beginning of the stitch that we started with, and don't backstitch. When we come back, I'll show you how we are going to tie those threads off so we don't have that ugly backstitch line. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So again, you're going to start in the middle of the side that has these here, all the way down, no backstitching. Across that 6.5 inch line, back up the other side here, across this 6.5 inch line, and come back, ending your needle in the exact same location where we started, leaving long threads on both ends. All right, so you can see I've left my threads long here, and that's what it looks like. It's very nice, decorative stitching, but you can see there's no ugly back stitch part. So I swear this is going to be the hardest part of the bag. I hate threading needles, but it does give a nice aesthetic, and because this is going to be very visible on the handle, because it's in the middle of the handle, we want to do that. So what you want to do is you want to thread one of your strings, one of your long threads, and you're going to feed it back through, but then through one of the holes, like it's stitch hole. Oh, my eyes. But when you do it, you're going to bring it up in between these layers. Can you see that? See how it's in between them? So what we want to do for each of those threads is go through and pull it in between. So now that thread, it's really hard to show, is in between. Let's see if I can thread this needle quickly here. I'm really bad at threading needles. It's getting really dark downstairs, so yeah, I'm not going to do that on camera. So you're going to go ahead with all of your extra string, all your long strings, is thread them with your needle and then feed them back through the stitch line in between the two layers there, and come back and I'll show you how to tie it off. Okay, so now you can see I have all of my threads coming through the center part, not on the outside, not on the back, and you can see how it's left it really nice there. So now what we're going to do is take those threads. I take 2 in one hand and 2 in the other, and I like to tie about 4 knots. And you're going to kind of pull it tight in between those layers. Not sure if you can see. It is a little tedious, but it is actually really pretty. It leaves the bag looking really pretty. So yeah, do it nice and tight so it gets right into those, into that crease there. Oh my gosh. I'm actually only going to do 3 because my thread is going to end up being a little too noticeable there. So I've done 3 knots. I'm going to trim it off as close as I can. Because I'm using a nylon bonded, I'm actually going to pull those apart a little bit and grab my lighter. And just burn those threads a little bit in between those layers, just so they don't unravel on me. If you're using just a cotton thread, be careful not to burn your, be careful, I thought I burned it. Careful not to burn your vinyl. If you're using just a cotton thread, just put a little bit of fray check in there and you should be good. So yeah, look how good that looks. Seamless. So I'm going to go ahead and do that with the other one, and then I will come back. So now we have our handles all done. And we should still have this 5.5 inch mark here. So now we want to take our front and back panels, grab a ruler, and with our Choco, we want to draw a line that is 5 inches up from the bottom. If you hear that grumbling sound, that is my little old dog, Benny. He's snoring underneath my feet here in his bed. So 5 inches in. Another thing that might help is marking our centers. So I'm just going to fold it in half. and make a little snip at the top and at the bottom, like so. The reason I'm going to do that is we have to find the center, and I'm scared if I fold it in half, I'm going to have too much of a crease in my vinyl here. So we have to find the center mark. So I'm just going to line up my two center marks this way, and then on that line, I'm going to mark it like that. So that's my center mark. So I have it set at the 2.5 inch mark from the center line, and we are going to take this, match it with that 5-inch line, and put this right up against our ruler and stick that tape down like so. And then we're going to stick the other side. So we're going to move this to the 2.5 inch mark, nice and straight. Bring this around without twisting it. Take off the tape. And match it with the ruler, and right at that 5, I'm actually going to move this up a bit so it's a little straight. I have more of a thing to go across. Make this nice and straight with that ruler. 2.5 inches away from that center mark that we made. So it should look like that. So you should have 5 inches in between the two straps. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it looks just like that. So go ahead and do that with the other panel, and then we'll come back and we will do the next step. Okay, so now I have both panels done, and what you should still have here is that 5.5 inch mark that we had previously put onto our straps. So this is where we're going to do the 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. We are going to, I just want to double check that I do this right. Yes. We're going to go to the sewing machine, and we're going to go, I'm going to go across here just to kind of tack this into place, and then 1/8 of an inch up this side, pivot at this line, and 1/8 of an inch back down. And I'm going to do that for all 4 straps. So again, you're going to go 1/8 of an inch up this side, across that 5.5 inch mark, and back down the other side. So go ahead and do that. Right, so I've gone ahead and done it. You can see how pretty the stitching is on those straps, how they go up. Very pretty. And this is where we're going to put a rivet. Now earlier I mentioned that we were trimming the end of the handles to keep it out of the seam allowance, but it's just keeping the bulk away from the center because this is closer to the center of the bag. So I just wanted to correct that. So the next step is you want to take your 2 handle overlays, and on the wrong side, apply some double-sided tape. Now, if you're using a machine that does not like double-sided tape and didn't want to gum up your corners, just make sure that you keep it out of where you're going to be top stitching this. This will actually not be seen except for when you look into the pocket, so it's just going to cover up the raw edges of that those handles. Like so. Remove your double-sided tape. And then we're going to lay it on top, matching up that bottom edge. And the sides nice and straight. Again, if you're like me and you didn't cut this panel quite as even as you should, it's going to be okay because it's not going to be seen. You just want to make sure it'll be caught in a seam allowance. like that. So now it's covered up. So that's where the bulk is. So now you can't see the bulk because we trimmed that away there. So then now what we're going to do is we're going to top stitch along this with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance over top with the straps, and then just baste it to the rest of this exterior panel. And you're going to do the exact same process on the other one. So go ahead and do that, and then we will come back and put on the fun decorative pocket, which is the part I'm excited for. So there we are. Our panels are done. So we're just going to put those aside for now, and we're going to work on our pockets. So you want to take your main exterior pocket and a lining piece. Whoops, not that one. One of these, and you're going to put them right sides together, and you're going to clip along this curved edge. Make sure it's nice and smooth. And then we're going to go and sew along this top edge. I'm going to also do that with the other panel, and then I'll come back. Okay, so I've gone around and I have sewn the curved edges with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now I'm going to take my pinking shears, and I'm just going to trim that seam allowance down to make it so it'll be nice and round. If you don't have pinking shears, you can also just put some notches in here. Try to make it about 1/4 of an inch or so away from your stitch line. Oops. Okay, and then once we've done that, we're going to turn this out and put them wrong sides together. If you've used vinyl for this exterior piece, you'll have to finger press this, but if you're like me and you use cotton, I'm actually going to take this to my iron and press that curve there. And then we're going to take it back to our sewing machine and top stitch along this top with a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, so you can see I've top stitched, and it's just holding the lining and that together, making nice and tight together. So then the next step is you can actually go through, and you'll see that there's these little kind of tails. You can cut those off. And then you're going to grab your completed panel, and you're going to sit it on top, matching up the raw edges. You want to make sure it is nice and centered, especially if you're using a print where you want it to be centered. Matching up those edges, making sure these come about the same. They do, and then just clip those together. Ow. And then we're going to take this to machine and baste the edges together. So we'll be going through 4 layers in some areas here. So go ahead and do that with both panels, going and basting them together. All right, so we've basted those layers together. Now what you're going to notice is it's going to seem like this is gaping a little bit. That is what we want, because when we go to put it together, we don't want it buckling underneath. So this piece was a little bit bigger than the lining, which I probably should have mentioned before. But yeah, so you do just want the slight gape. So I also went ahead and added some decorative rivets. Riveting always helps anyways, just for the stability of the handle. And I also put on my my nameplate here. So those are the front two panels done, and now we're going to move on to the zipper panels. Okay, so I've gone ahead and I got my 18-inch zipper. I actually made it, I think, almost 19 inches, mainly because I like to push my zipper pulls out of the way for when I'm sewing these on, so I don't have to worry about this bump that sometimes happens when you have your two zipper pulls together. So I'm just going to push those out of the way. I went and I tacked the end of this to kind of make a stop so they don't fall off that end. And then we have a nice straight surface here to work with. What I like to do, you can use clips for sure, but I like to actually use double-sided tape. I have this 1/8 of an inch width one, which really helps out a lot. So on the lining piece, the right side of the lining piece, I'm going to put some at the top. Like so. And same with on the exterior panel. Again, this is instead of using clips, so it sticks together better for me, but you can definitely use clips as well. Okay, so starting with the lining, we're going to put it right side up on the surface. Take off your tape and put your zipper tape, and it can extend a little bit on each side. We're going to trim it up later on, so it doesn't have to be exact. And then without stretching your zipper, just lay it along that edge. So it's the wrong side of the zipper to the right side of the lining piece. And if you weren't using double-sided tape, you would just go ahead and use clips to hold this in place. Like so. So it's all stuck on there nicely. And you can go ahead and you can do a base of 1/8 of an inch here, but I'm actually going to skip that step and do it all at once. So I'm going to take my main piece and right sides together. You want to make sure that you're lining up the lining where the lining starts here and this exterior piece. And then stick this all the way down as well. I like to go from one end and then match up the other end. And then kind of evenly distribute the fabric in the middle here. I'll stick it all down. This is really sticky tape, holy moly. Oops, I didn't get it lined up quite right. You want to make sure that there's no ripples or bumps in there, especially the exterior piece, because that will show. So there we go. We got it all together there. So I am actually going to go and put the zipper foot on my machine, and then I'm going to sew across here with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then I'll come back. Okay, so I've gone ahead and I have done that after having a fight with my Titan to put on that zipper foot. Usually I have my husband here and he does the screws so tight, but I got her. Okay, so what we want to do now is we want to, if you've used cotton, you can go ahead and press this with your iron, but I have vinyl for my exterior, so that won't work. So you want to press it away from the zipper, and same with the lining, so they kind of match up on this side. I sometimes like to just put some clips in there just to hold it nice and taut, because finger pressing doesn't always do it. You want to make sure that they are nice and lined up. If for some reason your lining is a little bit longer, that's okay. We can trim that up later on. Mine actually seems like it matches, so that's good. I'm just going to match up these and make sure they're pulled nice and taut, so they're even for my top stitching. Just push up something here. All right, so now what I'm going to do is take this to my machine and do a top stitch along here with a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the exact same thing with our other 2 zipper panel pieces, making sure that you match up, that they fall in the same place on the zipper. And then top stitching that, and then we will come back and we will do the next step. Okay, so I have that all done. It's all nicely top stitched. It's nice and even. So now, because I cut my zipper long enough, I've moved my zipper pulls into the middle of the panel, and I did a little tack stitch just inside the seam allowance here, and I can trim my zipper up. And I'm going to use my rotary cutter because my scissors, I need new scissors, they're not sharp enough. So that is what we have. So now what we need to do is we're going to add in our connectors for our crossbody strap that we prepared earlier. So what we want to do is I'm going to lie this here, and we want to center these on the zipper panel here and leave about a 1/2 inch overhang. So I'm just going to clip those into place. I'm just measuring it. I put it against the line here to 1/2 inch. So the D-ring is pointing towards the zipper tape. And same on the other side. So it's like that. And then do it on this side as well. So again, I'm just using my table. I wonder if that's center enough. Make sure it's nice and centered. Like that. Oops. And then I'm going to go with a long stitch length, and I'm just going to base this here with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so this is what it looks like basted on, about a 1/2 inch over. She's looking pretty perfect. So now we want to attach the gusset pieces. So you want to make sure your lining piece and your exterior piece are the same length. Sometimes using the interfacing can shrink it a little bit. Mine are good, but it's important that they are the same length. If one is a little bit shorter, just trim it up. It'll just be a little bit of a shorter bag, which is fine. Okay, so what we want to do is we'll do one side first. We want to take a main panel and clip it 2. So right sides together, the gusset exterior and the zipper panel main. Oh, that one's broken. So clip it together. And then you want to take your lining panel and you're going to sandwich the zipper panel in between. So now we're going to put our lining pieces right sides together and add that in there. Like so. So we have it zippered. We have 3 layers happening here. So our lining panels are first together, right sides together, and our exterior panels are right sides together. Now we're going to go along this side and stitch that with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so that's done with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now you're going to put the 2 panels together, wrong sides together, the lining piece and the exterior. And then we are going to go across and top stitch along here. Once you're done the top stitching, you're going to fold the lining panel out of the way and you're going to rivet this to the exterior main through here as well. So I'm going to do that off camera. Just make sure you pull the lining panel out of the way to rivet it on. There we go. So that's one side done. It's top stitched through here and then I have put the rivet through there. So that's where I made sure I pulled these apart so the rivet doesn't go through the lining, it's just through the exterior. So then what we want to do next is we want to do the same with the other side. So we're going to be forming a loop. So you're going to take your exterior, put it right sides together like this. And clip it. Bring your lining around the other way so they're right sides together. On the other side, sandwiching that zipper panel in between the layers. And clip it. And once again, we're going to sew that with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Pull our 2 panels wrong sides together, top stitch, and do the rivet. And then we'll come back and I'll show you what we got. All right, so there we go. We got our 2 strap connectors there. They're riveted in. And what we have is like a big loop. So what we're going to do now is we are actually going to, I'm going to clip them. We are just going to baste all of these raw edges together. I'm just putting in a few clips just to hold the layers together for me. So we're just going to go around the whole circumference. Make sure it's nice and even on both sides with the 1/8 of an inch seam allowance based. And that's just to make it easier for when we do our binding, so it's all being held into place where we need it to be. Okay, so I'm going to take it to the machine. I'm going to do a 1/8 of an inch on this side and then go ahead and do it on the other side as well. And then we're on to our lining panels. All right, so I've gone and I've finished the basting, putting these together. You can put this aside with your front and your back panels. So now we're working on the lining. I went ahead and installed my zipper pocket, mainly because I've done it different than the pattern. I'll eventually do a tutorial on how I do the zipper pocket. It's a brand new method for me and I am loving it. So yeah, you can either follow the instructions or you can look at my Bag Makers 101 playlist and you'll see how I usually install my zippers. The only difference is you will want to, in that playlist, I left the bottom of the pocket open. You're not going to do that with this one just because it's not a turning bag. It is a binding finish. So go ahead, install your zipper, and then we're going to move on to our slip pocket. So the way she does the slip pocket, let me just get there. Okay, so we are going to fold the slip pocket in half, right sides together. And we are going to sew down the 3 raw edges, except for at the bottom, we are going to leave about a 2 or 3 inch gap here to turn it. So we're going to sew to about, I always put a little red clip there, then I know that's where I'm going to stop. Okay, so I'm going to take this to the sewing machine, and with the 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, I'm going to sew down here, and then same on the other side, leaving a gap here. And then I'm going to turn it right side out and press it. All right, so I finished the slip pocket. After I turned it and pressed it, I also went and I top stitched along the folded side, not the side that has the opening in it. So when you press it, you want to make sure you press in the seam allowance that way, because we will be top stitching along this to close it up. So then you want to grab the lining panel that does not have the zipper pocket on it. And we want to center that. I'm actually just going to mark my centers here. Folding in half and just doing slight snips in the seam allowance to know where my centers are. It's a good habit to do that before you even start sewing, but I always forget. So, all right. So I have kind of a center fold line there. We want to place our ruler about 1.5 inches from the bottom, like so. And then you're going to take your slip pocket and fold it in half. And then what I like to do is just line it up with that line there that we kind of have a fold mark at. And line the bottom up with the ruler. Make sure it's nice and straight and centered. And then just flip it open like so. And then take some pins and pin it in place. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're not going to stitch along this top where we've done the top stitch already. We're just going to top stitch down the side, down the bottom, which is going to close up that opening, and then back up the other side, and then that'll finish our slip pocket. So go ahead and do that. Believe it or not, we are very close to being done. I will take you over to the sewing machine when it actually comes time to sewing the binding, so you can see me do that. But for now, we're just going to work at the table here. So there is our slip pocket. All raw edges are hidden, and our gap is closing up with the top stitching. So our next step is, we want to make sure, if we haven't already, marked our centers on all of our pieces, which I believe I have, on our front, main, and back panels, and our lining. So you want to decide which one, or where you want your zipper pocket to be. So I like my zipper pocket to be on the back side of the bag. So I'm going to take my back panel, and we are going to put them wrong sides together, like so, matching up our notches that we created for our centers, and clipping those all together. Make sure your zipper pocket is hanging down. Clip your centers. And then clip them together all the way around. Okay, see, my lining is just a smidgen longer here. I must have cut it weird. I'm just going to trim it to match the exterior of the bag because we want them to be the same size. Just a smidgen off. Still a little bit big. So then we end up with a panel like that. So there's the back of our exterior of the bag, and then there's the back of the lining clipped together, wrong sides together. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and I'm just going to baste these two pieces together, and I'm going to do the same with my other panel. When you're basting, make sure your handles are out of the way because you don't want to sew them up and into it, so pull them down. So just baste around here with the 1/8 of an inch seam allowance to put those pieces together. Do the same with the back panel, and then we'll come back to hook it up to the gusset. Okay, so we're getting very, very close to the binding stage. So now what you should have your gusset with your zipper panel, your back, main, and lining hooked together, and your front, main, and lining hooked together. And now we got to put them together. So we have our centers already marked on our main panels, and we got to mark them on our gusset. So what you want to do is you want to match up these seams right here, like so, fold it in half, and that's going to give you your centers for the zipper panel. So just do a small little clip, about 1/8 of an inch, so it's just in the same allowance to mark it. You can mark it with the pen as well. I just like to do this because then it doesn't rub away. Match those up again, press it down, and then that's going to give us the center for the bottom as well. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to turn this inside out. All right, I forgot to put my phone on Do Not Disturb, so I ended up getting a call which cut it off. So I believe I was at the point where we cut our centers. So now we're turning our gusset inside out, grabbing one of our panels, and right sides together, we're going to match up those center marks and clip them together. And then same with the top. Match up those center marks and clip them together. And then we're going to go around and evenly baste or evenly distribute this around. Now, when you get here, if it's a little tight, you can put small notches in the corners just to help ease that fabric around a little bit. I like to go ahead and do that, just about 1/8 of an inch, about where those corners are going to sit. Okay, and then just start clipping it around evenly, distributing that fabric everywhere. And you can see how the little notches help round the corner there. Okay, see, this is one thing I've already done wrong. You want to make sure the handle is inside. Otherwise, you're going to sew through it. So before matching up the upper gusset, zipper panel, make sure your handle is inside the bag. So I like to do one side and then I like to do the other from the center clip to center clips. And make sure there's no puckers in there. Now see here, it's having a hard time making that corner, so I'm just going to put a few small clips again to help evenly distribute that. This is in the gusset one. It's because we're going from a straight piece to a rounded piece. So we want to make it kind of have a little bit of give, and that allows us to do that. I apologize for my earphone thing here. I'm trying to use the mic now, so it gets a little bit clearer, but I need a longer cord and it hasn't come just yet. So there's one side done, and we can go ahead and do the other side. You can never use too many clips. This one I didn't have to clip my corners too much. It seems to be going in good. Okay, and then I'm going to take that to my machine. I will do the other side. I'll show you on the machine. I'm going to go ahead and do this side. You're going to baste it with a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around, making sure you don't sew through this handle. All right, so I changed my mind. I thought I would show you how I'm sewing this on. So we're just basting it with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, starting at the bottom with the panel down against the bed. Hoping you can see this. I think so. Make sure you're feeling for tucks. You don't want to have any, so kind of smooth them out as you go. If you have to adjust, make sure your needle is in the down position. Take your corners slow to make sure you don't get any nips or tucks or anything. Sometimes it's easier if you undo the zipper when you get to the gusset, just to give it a little bit more give. Make sure you don't sew over your straps. Okay. So kind of just look on the inside, make sure everything was caught. You can see how nice of a shape it's going to be inside. I just like to push around and see if there's any holes. There doesn't look like there's any tucks or anything. Some of it here went a little bit over, like right there. I'm just going to trim that away a little bit, just to make it even for when we do our binding. There we go. So that's the back panel on, and it's looking good so far. Okay, so now you want to make sure your zipper is undone. And we're going to do the exact same thing with the other panel. We're going to put it down this way, matching up our center notches, pinning all the way around, and putting it together, making sure your handle is tucked inside. And then sewing it or basting it all together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm going to show this on camera, but I am going to put it in time lapse, so it's going to go a little bit faster. And then we are to the fun part of binding. right, so we have it all sewed and we want to make sure we have it caught. So I just like to go around this side, make sure everything is good. Go around this, make sure we caught everything. Look inside. You could turn it right side out to take a peek. I think it's good. I'm just going to run my fingers along the seams to make sure there is no holes anywhere, and I don't believe there is. I think we're good. Okay, so next step is to go grab your binding. So go grab your binding. I'm actually going to change out my thread because I'm going to use a cream colored binding, and I like my thread to match that. I'm actually kind of wishing I used it for this because if any of that's going to show, but it won't show. It's into the creases of the bag. So go grab your binding, decide if you're going to change out the color of your thread, and then we'll get to finishing up this. Now the fun part of trying to show you how to do the binding. So I just use this bias tape, extra wide. Always go extra wide. I don't like the skinnier ones. I find they're sometimes hard to do. So the extra wide. I just open up the whole package. You won't use the whole package. Okay, so you want to open up the bias tape all the way like this. You want to kind of fold in one side. And then what you're going to do, decide which was the easiest way for me to do this. Okay, so here's our center mark. We're going to put this over here. So we folded that over, and it's like we're doing the right side of the bias tape, so where the folded part is, together with the lining. But you want to fold in that one side and clip it there. If you can see this, I want to try to make it show a little better. Okay, so this raw edge of the bias binding here, we're going to take that and just match it up all the way around. So it's opened right up. If you're noticing any bulk or where it's too even, you can trim the layers so they're more even or evener. More even, I think, is the correct language there. And you also, well, we did keep our zipper open, so that's good. Make sure your zipper is open because we're going to have to turn it right side out through the zipper. Like right here, I'm a little bit uneven, so I'm just going to go and trim that fabric back to even it up a smidgen. So I'm pinning this or clipping this to the gusset side. Doesn't really matter which side you do it on, whichever you're most comfortable with. But I will be sewing with this down on the machine bed for. I know some people try to do this without clipping it in place, but I always seem to lose control of it. I'm new to doing the binding method. I have done binding on quilts, but that's completely different. It's just flat surfaces. You're not going around too many curves or anything. So I like to clip it just to make sure everything is going to stay where it's supposed to stay. Almost there. Okay, so now where we get to where our binding has started, we want to kind of overlap them. Like here is where this one started. We're going to pull this one inside there still and go past it about an inch. So clip them together there and there so they overlap. So this is the one we started and this is where we finished. And trim that one away. And this should be enough to do the other side of the bag, which it will be. Okay, so now it's time to take a deep breath. I'll put this further away so you can see what I'm doing. I apologize for the moving camera. All right, so I'm going to put it down like this, squish it forward, and going to stitch that with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way around to put that in place. So you're pressing this flat like this. I'm actually just going to go and double check what our seam allowance is if we're still doing 3/8. Okay, yes, it is 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and you want to make sure your stitch length is about a 2.5 to a 3. I'm actually going a 3.5 because it's a little bit thicker for me. So yeah, I actually have a little stitch thing here. I'm going to stick here just to give me, I don't have any seam guidelines, so that's just going to let me know whereabouts I need to be. Make sure you back stitch at the beginning and go all the way around. Again, making sure there's no pucks or tucks or anything like that as you go. Take your corners nice and slow. Sometimes putting your hand in the bag just to, if you feel a pucker, just to kind of smooth it out helps. So when you do that, make sure your needle is down. Okay, so that's partway done. I like to go around and just make sure, it's nice when you use a different color thread because you can actually see to make sure you got it all the way around. You can see here how some of my black thread is going to show because I didn't go quite over top of it there, but that's okay. It's going to be hidden kind of in the crease, so nobody's going to notice that. Okay, now to finish off this binding, what we want to do now, so we have our 2 joining pieces here. So now we want to keep the fold, this fold here. See how it opens up? We want to keep that fold because we need that finished edge on this side of the bag. So for this bottom one, kind of fold it down and then match it up with this other one on top. And this is the one where we folded the edge in so we wouldn't have a raw edge. So kind of play with that to get it in place. I like to do that spot first and then pull it up and over the edge like this. See, like that, hiding any of the raw edges. So you're going to do that all the way around the bag. Fold it up and over, up, and it's just tucking all of those raw edges inside like that. The corners will be a little bit tight, but that's okay. Up and over. You can see on this side, this is where we just did our stitch. It's nice there. Up and over. Just gotta make sure all the raw edges are covered up. And in the right world, our basting stitches are covered by this. You won't see them. Now, I always have a couple, but you don't see them once the bag is done. They kind of get hidden in the crease of the bag, but another thing that's nice to use for binding is fold over elastic because it doesn't have any raw edges. You kind of do it the same way, but it's a little bit stretchier, so it's easy to go around. It's just a little more expensive to buy the fold over elastic. I'm going to have to trim that corner down. It's a little bit too thick. So just make sure you don't cut into your stitch line if you find that you're having a hard time getting around. Just make sure you don't stitch into the main stitch line there. Ouch. There we go. That's better. I find the corners are always the hardest. And I tend to take the corners a little wide so the seam allowance ends up being a little bit bigger there sometimes. All right, I'm going to continue doing that and then I'll come back and show you how we're going to finish sewing that. So we have it all clipped all the way around. So now what we want to do is as close as we can to this edge, so within 1/8 of an inch, we want to go and we want to stitch all the way around, and that will solidify the binding and have those raw edges completely encased. So this way is a little bit trickier. Take a deep breath. The bag is quite stiff. Make sure this part of the bag is out of the way because we're only working on the one panel. And I like to start on the bottom and about 1/8 of an inch. And take it slow if you need to. Back stitch and start working your way around. Think of it kind of like when we're top stitching a bag. It kind of has that same feel, how it's stiff and it's standing up, but you have to do it on two sides. But the good news is this stitching doesn't really show, unlike your top stitching. If it's messy, it's visible for everyone to see, where this will be hidden in the crease and you're not going to see it. That's why I choose to use a thread the same color as my binding, and then you don't see uneven stitches if you happen to have them. See what I'm doing. Just go clip to clip, nice and slow, making sure you're catching that edge for sure. See, it's not that scary at all. A little bit awkward, but I can see how it would make some bags easier, like backpacks and that sort of thing, or bowler bags in general. Because of how those gusset and zipper panels are, sometimes it's hard to make it a turning bag, and sometimes drop-in linings can just be a real pain in the arse. You either are good at them or you're not. I'm starting to learn more about drop-in linings. Other thing to do is make sure you have enough thread, because there's nothing worse than getting all the way around and finding out that you sewed nothing. And we're almost done. And back stitch at the end. And because I'm using a nylon bonded thread, I do like to just burn my start and stops, just to melt it. So you can see there how it goes all the way around, and there is no raw edges on either side. So that's one side done. So go ahead, try the other side on your own. You're going to do it exactly the same way. And then once that's done, you can turn it out and your bag is done. So go do that. I'm going to go finish that up, and then we'll see what it looks like on the inside. Yay! Okay, so we have finished. We did our binding. I said you can't even tell if you've made any mistakes with the binding because they get hidden in the corners. It's amazing that way. As long as those raw edges are covered, you are good. But you can see how a binding rather than a turning bag, it gives it such great structure. And this is an amazing, amazing bowler bag. I mean, it's actually a decent size. I really, really like it. So yeah, thank you everybody for tuning into this tutorial. I hope it was helpful. Again, thank you Alexis for writing such an amazing pattern and allowing me to do a tutorial on my channel. I so appreciate it. Enjoy making your bowler bags, guys. Bye.